Should be close to where they are, you know.
Out of So, ladies and gentlemen, what you have before you is a company of the Mount Hope Train Band. And if you're wondering what train bands are, we have nothing to do with musical instruments. We're indeed Her Majesty's National Guard, if you will. So citizen soldiers plucked from their shops and their fields and trained in the use of arms, only called upon in times of great crisis. Now, I have two types of soldiers here, the primary fronts, if you will, of the battlefield of the 16th century, the armored pikemen and the matchlock musketeers. I'm going to work with each in turn, showing you how they would be trained and what their function on the battlefield would be, and then put them both together to show you how they would work together as a cohesive unit. We're going to start with our pikemen. Pikemen, prepare to march, and march on. Prepare to stand and stand. Face your bodies by the left hand. By the right hand, double your files and face yourself 4 paces to the rear. So, we have the pikemen, named so for the very long spear in each of their hands. This pike is 12 feet long. Normally, this weapon can be at lengths of upwards of 16 to 20 feet long. However, we know from our research that Germans, as much by pike block has been recruited from those strong lads that come from Germany, thereof, enjoy the 12-foot pike, as it does make them just a little more maneuverable. Now they're armored front and back with a breast and back plate. Their thighs protected by what we call tassets. And of course they're carrying a sword as their secondary weapon. They're very well trained in the use of this weapon. Now, in order to move them around the battlefield, I need to teach them certain things that we call posture. The first posture, the most important, is how they're going to stand. I'll have to tell them to order their pike. To place the butt of the pike upon the ground, placing their hand upon their hip, and generally standing about as though they were gods given to women. Ladies and gentlemen, this is about as close to attention as we get in the time period. Have a care. Now, if I need to move them around, I'll teach them a posture of advance their pike. They'll take the pike up, placing it in a pocket, they form their arm, and carrying it nearly vertical. It's from here that they can maneuver around rather easily. They can turn about in place without knocking into one another. However, on road marches, this can get a bit more difficult for them. Because if they start to move at any sort of great speed, the weapon may bounce out of that pocket that they've made, come crashing down on the gentleman in front of them, and suddenly I have a brawl in my hand. Well, I don't want that, so while on marches, I'll teach them to a posture called shoulder their pike. You bring the pike down, carrying it at about the balance point of the weapon. This makes it very easily. However, they do sacrifice some maneuverability. You imagine that they're all suddenly deterred, they're now hitting the gentleman in front of them back of the shin. Again, another brawl. I'm now having not just a bad week, but a bad month. So this brings us to two ways that the pikemen engage the enemy in combat. The first is against infantry. It is the posture of charge their pike. They'll have them return to advance their pike. They will then court their pike, which incidentally is how we get around all these lovely low-lying branches. You can see the reason we call it court their pikes is they're generally moving through doorways and those trees, hence why it's called court. In other words, portal, doorways and such. They'll then charge their pike, placing their fist below their chin and sighting down the shaft. It is from here that they can deliver a very powerful thrust, which we practice and drill with the command of lay on! Lay on! They'll repeat that motion until it is desired effect is achieved, namely the destruction of their enemies. Now, a pike block is also rather maneuverable in this situation. It's very difficult to come up behind them and try to catch them by surprise. Pikemen, shoulder your pike. This is because of the following maneuver. Pikemen, charge to the rear your pike. And lay on. Charge to the rear your pike. Lay on. Now, also the strength of the pike formation is in its depth. What you see is what would be the front of the pike block. I'm going to show you what the side would look like. Pikemen face their body by the left hand. Now as you can see what 4 ranks of pikemen would look like in a block. The block would be anywhere between 30 and 100 men. You see the first man is ready to fight in the normal charge for pike position. The second man is aiming a bit lower. As you can see from their armor, they're aiming for their fellow pikemen's weak point, namely the face, the thigh, the groin. This is where they're going to try and put this weapon through. Now, the rear 2 men, the third and fourth men there, they're waiting. If these men should get killed, they're ready to fill in those ranks. Also, sergeants, which we happen to have one, the gentleman in the red sash there at the end, he's watching this formation, looking for these front 2 ranks who are doing all the fighting to grow tired, to fatigue. If he sees that, he's going to draw them out of the combat and put fresh men in their place. So he will rotate those ranks through, always keeping this unit ready for the fight. Now, in order to get into this formation is, if you'll pardon the pun, a bit of a prickly endeavor. If I can get past this first man here, all he can really do is hit me about the head and neck rather uselessly. And it becomes the second man's job to get me. But if I somehow get past him and kill the first man, the third man in rank brings his pike down ready to continue the fight. You may rise, Lazarus. We'll give young Rudolph a moment to make himself presentable. I'm not holding out much hope. Very well. Pikemen, face your body by the right hand. And advance your pike. What would your mother say? Now, this brings us to the second way as pikemen engage the enemy. This is actually the primary way that they're going to be used in the battlefield. You may notice by looking at my musketeers, they are lacking a weapon that you may know as a bayonet. This is because this weapon will actually not be invented until about the year 1680, when a Frenchman designs a knife that can be stuck into the end of their barrel, the first bayonet. They rely on the pikemen in order to defend themselves against cavalry. The way they do that is assuming a position called charge for a horse. Place the front of the pike upon the ground, drawing their sidearm, and then leaning the pike out. Now, the point of this weapon is not actually aimed at the rider of that horse. I hope not to upset any animal lovers here. It is indeed leveled at the chest of the horse. This is because 2 things are going to happen. The first is that horse will crash into this formation, armor and pikemen flying everywhere. Don't worry about any of them, though. I'll just hammer out the dents in the armor and make a few more that look just like them in only a couple of weeks. But the other thing that will happen is the far more likely. This is because the horse generally is smarter than his rider. He's going to look at this porcupine and go, no way, there isn't any oats and carrots in the world that could get me to run into that. So he's going to stop short. Now that armored knight on horseback has momentum working against him. He's going to go flying over those reins and land in this lovely little porcupine. And if you should somehow survive that, there are always pesky musketeers lurking in the rear, ready to finish him off. But in either case, something's going to happen to this weapon. It's going to break. It's going to shatter. It's simply going to be knocked from their hand. At which point, pikemen receive their favorite command, and that is, pikemen, put your pikes and fall upon the audience.
Who puts your rope up?
Now would be a good time to mention that pikemen generally were recruited for their strength of arm, not their strength of mind. Pikemen, return to your formation. So before they can embarrass themselves any further, I'm going to return to the company. Pikemen, reform the ranks and files, and return to the formation. But let them know you appreciated what they did. They do work very hard. matchlock musketeers. Musketeers prepare to march and march on. Prepare to stand and stand. Face your bodies by the left hand. By the right hand, double your file. Now, when you think musketeers, certain imagery might pop into your mind, particularly maybe a popular culture nature. And when you think of that imagery, I want you to look at these fine examples of musketeers, and can anyone tell me what they think might be missing? I heard it over here, a little louder. Swords, very good. This is because, unlike those fancy French gentlemen you may have all been thinking about, put your hands down. You may be French, but you're hardly gentlemen. I took that out of the gutter for you. Anyway. Yes, unlike those fancy French gentlemen who have been trained practically since birth in the use of the sword, we are citizen soldiers. So I've taken these fine folks from their places of employment and trained them in the use of arms. I'm not going to waste any time teaching them anything they don't need to know about. The sword is one of those things, particularly when each one of them is carrying a very handy club. Now, don't get me wrong. Being issued a sword is the sign of being a soldier in England during the Elizabethan era. However, these guys are going to be using this much more as a tool than a weapon. They may roast their dinner with it, or hammer in their tent stakes, or cut some firewood. Rarely will they use it as a weapon of war when they have this lovely weapon here. Speaking of which, we're using the matchlock musket, which is the height of firearms technology in the 16th century. Named so for the piece of burning cord in each of their hands. This is slow match. This cotton or hemp rope that has been soaked in saltpeter. So when ignited, it burns very hot and very slowly. The pole on the end of that match reaches temperatures of nearly 400 degrees. They're essentially putting fire into gunpowder. Something is bound to happen. In fact, this weapon is so simple to use and simple to manufacture that when it is introduced around the year 1450, it will continue to be in use until the year 1688, when the last matchlock is decommissioned from the English military. The French will actually continue to use this weapon until the year 1704. And indeed, even after that, if you go to some more rustic households and the colonies of the New World, you may find this weapon sitting above the mantelpiece, ready to be put into action. As I said, it's very simple to use. There are only 21 steps in the loading and firing of this weapon. And it's taught to them through the pages of a picture book. Why a picture book, you may ask? Well, the literacy rate in the 16th century isn't that great. And therefore, they look at the pictures in order to tell them how they're supposed to stand and what they're supposed to do. The pikemen will actually use the same picture book. And I can tell you from experience that after only 2 weeks, they can color inside the lines and everything. The first step is they will handle their piece. They'll then open their pan and clean out their pan, getting any dirt out of that pan left over from the last shot. They'll then handle their prime and prime their piece, pouring a small amount of very fine gunpowder in that pan that dish to the side. They'll then close their pan. And because we're about to put the very hot coal of the match very near the gunpowder, we need to make sure there isn't anywhere we don't want it. They will cast off loose corns and blow off loose corns. Corns was another name for the grains of gunpowder. They will then cast about their piece. This gives them access to the muzzle. Now I will have them handle their charge. And there's 3 of the musketeers run for their wooden bottles across their chest. This is their bandolier of charges. Each one of those wooden bottles has enough gunpowder for 1 shot from the musket. Now the musketeer on the end there in the red sash, she's a bit more specialized. She's what we know as known as a dragoon. A dragoon is a musketeer that's issued a horse. Well, really, it's more like a pony. But she'll use this animal to go from one place in the battlefield to another very rapidly to redeploy herself. She'll then dismount and fight on as a musketeer. Now, if you can imagine bouncing around in a saddle wearing a bandolier could get a bit uncomfortable. Therefore, in order to prevent her from becoming a black-eyed Susan, we issue her with a paper cartridge filled with gunpowder instead. This was actually introduced around the year 1550. So I will have them now charge their piece, pouring down that full measure of gunpowder. It is also at this point, if they were loading a shot, which they are not today, they'd simply pluck one from the pouch at their side, or more often, spit one down the barrel they've been carrying around in their mouths. This may sound ridiculous considering it's a lead ball, but the dangers of lead poisoning aren't very well known in the 16th century. It's also far more convenient to have them in your mouth than have to fish around in that pouch, particularly when you're getting shot at. However, there's some practical reasons for this. And that is, all of these muskets you see here are made by hand. Each one's just a little bit different than the next. All of your musket balls are made by hand. Each one's just a little bit different than the next. You may have to chew on your musket ball in order to get it to fit down the barrel. This actually brings us to a requirement to join the train band as a musketeer, and that is you must possess 3 opposing teeth, but just 3. So now I will have them draw forth their scouring stick and ram home their charge, seating everything good and tight down at the bottom there. They will then recover their scouring stick and replace it, which is the most important step of this entire drill. Hey, don't get me wrong, you can fire your scouring stick, it makes an excellent projectile. However, it's a rather awkward weapon, the awkward part being having to go across the battlefield and ask for it back. We don't want any shish kebabs, so we make sure we put it back. They will then recover their piece, take forth their match and blow it well, it says in the manual arm, to get that coal good and hot. You can actually see it glow orange there. They'll then cock and try their match, placing in the jaws of the serpentine and working the action to ensure it's going to hit the proper place in the pad. And it's at this point that they're ready to fire. So I'm going to turn them in a safe direction. Musketeers, wheel your body by the left head about the center. Head face yourself 4 paces to the rear. I'll then call them to present their piece. Have a care! Give fire! Now, good musketeers are expected to be able to fire at the rate of 3 rounds in a minute. Now, obviously, they can't do that while being given each and every little command of the drill. Therefore, my job gets very simple. All I need to say is, musketeers, make ready your piece. They will now do so as quickly as they can. Like any good soldier, they're going to take that drill that they learned and adapt it to make it work best for themselves. You may actually see musketeers skip step. Most often you'll see them tap the butt of the weapon down on the ground rather than use their scaring stick. They can actually get away with this for the first few rounds that they fire, as that musket ball is very loose fitting and will just go straight down. And as it builds up the fouling there, they will need to use that scouring stick or they may blow up. So, that was actually very pretty time. Present your piece and give fire! Now, something else you may have noticed. The butt of the weapon never touches the ground. This is because in addition to that 21 step, in addition to that 20 seconds per round time they need to get out, musketeers are also expected to be able to reload whilst on the move. The reason for this has been standing here the whole time, our armored pikemen. These musketeers are marching shoulder to shoulder with the pikemen, just as it's the pikemen's job to make sure the musketeers don't get run over by cavalry. It's the musketeers' job to make sure that the pikemen get into hand-to-hand combat without being filled with too many bullet holes. So, the musketeers perform a maneuver called fire by attack. You imagine a few more ranks of musketeers here, the rear ranks will be close to the front. They'll discharge their weapons at a volley like we've just shown you. They'll immediately begin to reload. The new rear rank will come forward and do the same. The effect you have is you're leapfrogging by rank, closer and closer towards the enemy. I'll show you how this works in nature.
I want to go on that
By the left hand, double your rank.
Yeah, we're going on the spinning.
Look.
Rear rank, advance to the floor. Present your piece and give fire. Rear rank, advance to the floor.
Scary?
Present your piece
Wow.
and give fire.
Yeah, I want to go on that.
So that's how the matchlock musketeer would work. Let them hear your appreciation there. The final thing I'm going to show you today is how these two types of soldiers would work together on the battlefield. And as my musketeers make ready, I'll give you a little briefing of what you're about to see. We're going to use that charge for horse scenario. If you imagine a thundering horde of armored knights coming up over this hill, this company needs to be able to defend itself. So what's going to happen is the pikemen are going to rush forward and down into that charge for horse posture. They're going to make themselves into a human wall for which the musketeers will fight from behind. The musketeers are going to come up behind them, and in a variation of that fire by advance, come up by rank, discharge their weapons, and retire to the rear to make ready again as the next rank comes up and does the same. And the hope is that that constant rate of fire will be enough to break up that charge before these poor pikemen could ever get run over. We are ready? We'll show you how this would work. Company, prepare for horse!
Mark the horse and full steel line. Turn and steel.
Front rank to the line. Present your feet and give fire. Turn, make ready. Second rank to the line. Present your feet and give fire. Turn and make ready. Job well done. Pikemen, you have your rank and file. Company, face your bodies by the left hand. By the left hand, double your file. Company, salute. So, ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our demonstration for the day. At 5 o'clock upon Bosworth Field, where all the jousting happens, we'll actually be demonstrating our lovely little artillery piece there. Now, as the matches go out, the weapons will be deemed safe, and I invite you to come forward, ask any questions you may have, or simply take a closer look at our equipment. However, I will leave you with this one final warning. That is this: the pikemen are trained, but they are not tamed. Please, no shiny objects or sudden movements. They do startle very easily.